Yo, what's up? Um, I am making a video. It's a little bit different from what I usually do. I'm usually talking about religion or politics, philosophy, etc. Now I'm going to be talking about sports. Um, I and it's revolving around all the Jake Paul stuff. I have some sports experience, although I'm not a boxer per se. And I know, like, my experiences in taekwondo, football, wrestling. I did a little track, powerlifting. Um, did a couple other martial arts like touch of kung fu, and then tai chi, and a little bit of monkey style, and five animal. Okay, so basically, the Jake Paul stuff, what's got me concerned is really in the area of epistemology and politics. What can be done with brainwashing? Now, I know that there is a massive kind of anti Jake Paul gang, and basically, um, what I've kind of seen out of his career really, I believe, should be praised. And yet, it's kind of like he's been put out as public enemy number one, which helps him out because, he's the problem child. Therefore, people want to beat him up. Therefore, people pay tickets to, see him do that. But I just want to address a couple things because I do kind of feel like this is what's called a psychological operation. I don't believe it's like a major, major New World Order coup, but I think that there are some gangs and nefarious things going on, and it's good to address it. Now, as far as like my feelings about Jake, um, I don't necessarily like think of him as like, oh, he's such a great guy. Oh, he's always right. No, I'm not saying that either. It's just that the narrative is just it's being put out there is just so wrong. Now, I don't really qualify him as a Christian. I know his mom does. His mom does seem to be like a devout, I love Jesus kind of mom. So, that's nice. She got Logan Paul to put on a evangelist, Cliff Kanecki. And so, I would believe that she does, is genuinely a believer. But Jake Paul, he said a lot of things, the universe this, the universe that, and that's a pantheistic or pagan worldview. He will, occasionally concede to like saying something about God, but no, I don't believe that, he's a Christian. I think he is, his presentation makes him look pretty nasty and ugly. But I don't think he's naturally that way. So, in other words, he's just trying to look cool or tough. But nevertheless, let's see here. So, I just, got interested in Logan Paul because I was interested in pro wrestling. So, I was like, okay. So, I watched Logan Paul and then found out about Jake Paul and then saw what he's doing. And as I started to get further, he seemed, the more you got to know him, he just seemed like in real life, he seemed more like an unlikable guy. Now, look, I'm not, going with any expertise. So, I could be fooled about some of these things. That's fine and good. But let's just kind of go through this and kind of see what's going on. So, let's see here. First thing that I'd like to address is the notion of some of this ideology. Like, you'll have 40 or 50 YouTube channels, and they're all bashing, and they're all using the same phrases. And sometimes they do something weird, which I know is like kind of getting popular on YouTube. they're starting to like make these manuscripts like you're reading a novel, and oh, it was like this and that, no, on the day, and it's like it's a lot of literary stuff, and it's kind of like, okay, But for me, that kind of, as far as the artificial nature of it, I think it's more artificial on the other side. The the idea got carried across that, of course, the bigger athlete always beats the smaller athlete. Ever. It never changes. And I'm like, that's not quite the case with boxing, right? Mike Tyson is not a huge guy. In fact, Jake Paul at their match, he was obviously taller, he was obviously bigger, but only in certain ways. Like Jake, recently gained the weight to fight him. Okay, but basically Tyson, he would fight guys who were just as tall as Anthony Joshua, sometimes bigger, and usually it was knockout. Okay, but he only stood at like 5'10", 5'11". Meanwhile, Rocky Marciano, I believe he was 5'9". He was also, like Jake, a cruiserweight. I would encourage people to go on YouTube and look up his fight. Of course, he's from the 50s, but he was undefeated. And look at his fight with Joe Walcott. Big, massive African American world champion. And basically, Rocky just took all of his punches and then punched back. And then right at the end, just beat the ever-loving snot out of him because of conditioning. If you have better conditioning, that means you have the endurance, you have the strength, you have the speed, then you can defeat your opponent who's bigger. You just simply outlast what they're doing and then take them down. Rocky wasn't, doing the sweet science. He was just a brawler. But Muhammad Ali had a computer fight with him. Now, the computer fight was where they staged different pieces of fight, and essentially Ali complained that Marciano would hit too hard. But Marciano, at the time that was filmed, was in his 50s. Okay, so it's kind of like the reverse of the Jake Paul thing. But basically, he admitted that he would have had a huge amount of trouble and might not even be able to beat Rocky Marciano in his prime. But there's something interesting here culturally because, once again, Jake Paul is put out as a villain. And one thing he's put as a villain is because he's entertaining, and he's also a villain because he gets away from his opponents. And what was the other thing? Flashy, entertaining. He was arrogant. Okay, how dare a boxer be arrogant? Well, Ali was all of those things. I mean, he was the hero, but he wasn't really the hero at the time. He was hated. Why? Because he said, I am the greatest. No one can beat me. I'll do this. I'll knock you out in round 3, And he would do poems, and he admitted to being inspired by the 1950s pro wrestler Gorgeous George. He realized that sports needs a little bit of entertainment if you want to draw money at the gate. So what is Jake Paul doing? He's drawing money at the gate. Jake Paul has a lot of accusations against him. And unfortunately, not only these accusations, but they're contradictory ones. So the first one is that Jake Paul is not a boxer. The evidence for this is that he did not go through the Golden Gloves process, did not compete in the Olympics, did not grow up a boxer. Therefore, he can't possibly be a boxer. Well, if you look at the old days, like a John L. Sullivan type, there's no Olympics. It's like, It's just, whoop your A, just beat them down, beat them until they're half dead. And John L. Sullivan was, you know, undefeated. Um, I'll have to check that, but I will say he had like about 75 knockouts. It's like, I think it was like 2 to 400 fights back then. This is the 1800s. Of course, there's a lot of different rules. But essentially, where I'm going with that is that boxing is not, necessarily orthodox. People didn't get mad or volatile or anything when it came to now I'm gonna what's his name, Butterbean. Nobody's mad about Butterbean. I mean, some people may have made fun of him for being overweight, but there's really no hatred of like, hey, okay, here's a guy who comes in here, he knocks him out, knocks him the blank out, boom, 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 boom. 300 to 400 pounds, bam. Okay. Basically he came out of a different upbringing. He went through the tough man contest. All right. And then he did some professional fights. He just wasn't, obviously wasn't built for, many rounds. He'd usually get his stuff done in 2 or 3 rounds, which he could still do in the pros because all he has to do is just knock him out. If there's somebody who can't last the distance, just win the match early. You don't have to win a great pinfall. So those are examples of where there's just a lot of misguidedness to this nature. Jake Paul, they think he's a nefarious figure. Okay, obviously he's faking it. Why? Okay. Now, some have said, well, his brother became a pro wrestler after, Paul had already been fighting in the celebrity internet boxing and all that kind of stuff. Well, let's think about that. If you're going to fake fighting, you want to be good at it. You could argue, well, maybe I'll be a stuntman, but stuntmen are not nearly as good as pro wrestlers. Pro wrestlers are the masters of illusion when it comes to a fight. So, how does a pro wrestler punch? A pro wrestler, when they punch, first of all, they don't have gloves, so it's not quite the same. But they stomp their foot. And when they stomp their foot, at the time that they hit, makes a noise, and everybody's like, ooh, ah, okay. I was just watching the matches. Jake Paul doesn't do the stomp. Okay, there's none of that. Another one, there's a conspiracy that, like, when he makes his demon face, like he'll get hit and make a demon face. Oh, that's a code. What's a code? First of all, how do you, like, make that your code? Because, like, if he's like, oh, yeah, that'll get him to stop hitting. Well, it didn't get Anthony Joshua to stop hitting. And neither did it get Mike Tyson to stop hitting. But basically, what was that? Psychological warfare. Okay, I can take your punch because I'm evil. Aha, that makes sense. And it's also entertaining. But it's not necessarily, oh, well, it's a secret code. These are presuppositions that are put in. So these groups, they constantly say Jake Paul is the bad guy, and he's just the bad guy, and that's it. Now, one thing is that Jake Paul was raised an athlete. Okay? Now, if you're in an athletic sport, being athletic yourself and having the physical abilities is a massive part of things. Techniques can be learned. Now, I had an experience when I tried out for college football, and there was a fellow there who had never played football before in his life. However, he was a basketball player. He was about 6'6", 6'7", and he was filled out and real muscular. The issue about technique, they felt, was actually a plus on his side because they could train him without any contradiction from previous coaches. So, like, if I'm like trying to block, um, one group of thought was here, you pump up, you pump them up. Another was you, I forgot what was like an uppercut, I guess, but it's kind of over here. I'm not a great vocabulary guy when it comes to sports, but yeah, he kind of comes over there, and then sometimes you shake and all that kind of stuff. So that was my move. I'd shake them 1, 2, 3. For some reason, they'd always lose their balance at the third. You throw them one way, throw them another. In Tai Chi, it kind of worked out pretty well that way too. Yeah, you throw them one way, throw them 2 ways. Now they're destabilized. They fall right down. So going back to it, yeah. So this guy ended up starting. Why? Because he was more trainable because there's no contradictions. So that could be a thing with training Jake. Jake had experience with football and wrestling, and therefore he was physically at the level, maybe not quite the level, but at least as far as like having experience and now kind of getting into things. Jake also, as time went on, got a national level boxing coach team. So most boxers don't have that many resources, and he had all of them. Okay, so he's getting high level training. He's not getting high level pro wrestling training. Okay, I think Jake was once involved in one match of Logan's, where it was just some guy at the outside. Da, 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 da. Okay, well, Donald Trump did that too. It's like, that doesn't mean that you're, a pro wrestler. Nor do you need that much training for, just a couple seconds. So once again, he's trained in boxing. He's not trained as a professional wrestler. But let's see here. Boxing, they act as if boxing is as pure as the driven snow sport that never had faced corruption, and now Jake is corrupting it. Not only did you have fixed fights back in the day, but you had mafia bosses owning boxers. Even if they're legitimate, they were still being owned and coerced by the mafia. Okay? And that's going from the early 20th century all the way up. Muhammad Ali's first heavyweight championship against Sonny Liston, people felt that was fixed because Muhammad Ali gave this weird kind of little punch, and then Sonny Liston goes down. And we know that Sonny Liston was controlled by the mafia. Well, basically, he said, oh, it's some sort of martial arts Denmark touch. Ha ha! Well, let's say if there is a Denmark touch. Okay, that is something disputed. But if there were a Denmark touch, the problem is that they're wearing boxing gloves. Okay? You'd have to be very specific if you're going to get to somebody's nerve center and do it to that level where you can knock them out with a touch or whatever. Okay, I mean, you have to be very accurate. And Muhammad Ali may have played with a couple of martial art things here and there, was not a full-fledged student. He's got boxing gloves. He can't even use a finger. Okay, and there goes that. So a lot of people feel that fight, not the rest of his fights, but that fight specifically was rigged. So, boxing is not pure as the driven snow. Don King, the promoter at the time of Mike Tyson's, prime, Don King killed the guy who owned him money. He killed him barehanded in public. Okay? So, yeah, there's a lot of corruption in the boxing. So Jake Paul is not adding to the corruption. However, he is disrupting the system. How dare you think that you can go up, without going up through the ranks? Really, that's not a problem unless they just grant him a world championship. What was it? Fight, which nobody has stated. Now, it is true that the WBA gave him a ranking 14th in the cruiserweight category. What does that mean? That means that he's kind of ranked. It may one day be possible for him to fight for the world title, but it's not like that high of a ranking. It's not like he's instantly going to get it. The only thing that would be for question is if they did, if they give him an automatic light heavyweight world championship fight, for his next fight, then there's a problem. Okay, admittedly, because since he got that ranking after being Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., he had one fight that he lost with a guy who was outside the weight class. So that should not propel him upward. In fact, taking time off, there might be guys who replace his ranking. So that's not quite in the cards. I do think that he could one day get there. But let's kind of go a little further along here. So if, Jake Paul is if he's a total fake, then, why would Anthony Joshua break his jaw? Okay. So the big deal about him is that, it is respectable that he went up a weight class, took on a guy who's massively bigger and stronger, and also very fast. But he lasted 6 rounds when all these experts were saying he'd be out by the second round. Major experts were saying he'd be out by the second round. And then, of course, they were all saying, if it doesn't go exactly the way we say it is, it's all fake. Why? Because you have a presupposed agenda, okay? Like, he couldn't win. If he won, then he's fake. If he lost, well, that's it. You're a loser. Take that. But, he went 6 rounds. When we look back at Chuck Wepner went the distance with Ali. He didn't win, but he went the distance. It was respectable. He took on a high caliber athlete and went the distance. Now, Jake lasted 6 rounds. Okay, maybe not the distance, but he lasted a long time against a guy who was obviously of a higher caliber. That was never contested. They were just mad that Jake was confident. But Jake is a boxer, and every boxer is confident, or they don't belong in the ring. Period. Okay? You have to have confidence that you're going to win, or you shouldn't. You shouldn't go in there and say, I'm going to get beat up, and then let somebody beat you up. No. So there's nothing wrong with him coming in there. There's nothing wrong with him giving his best, and it should be admirable. It really should. Especially if you think he's a fake. Especially if you think he's a loser. It should be admirable that he went that long, that he was able to take that much punishment. Now, some people say that he automatically has to retire forever now because he broke his jaw. I wasn't able to get good stats as far as, if there's ever been any boxer in history that broke a jaw and came back. I would assume there is, but unfortunately, I'm just not going to spend that much energy on this. However, I did look up a website that said the jaw recovery time is between 3 and 6 weeks. Jake wants to take this year off. That's more than enough time. So, he's healing up, and obviously, the guy didn't get knocked out, okay? And not only did he not get knocked out, but he was able to give a speech afterwards. All right, so obviously, if he's not, a fake, then he is tough, and also he should be admired for this stuff. Oh, he didn't go through Golden Globes. Wow, you did all that and achieved all that. Bravo! You did that without going through the Golden Globes? That's amazing. Of course, he does have things that benefit him. Number one, he got the big fights because he had some fame. It's not that he was like, people were acting like that he was like automatically some billionaire when all these fights started. That's not the truth, okay? He has escalated things and he's made a lot of money off of boxing. But it is false to kind of say, well, he rigged every fight because he was the big billionaire, like that's not the case. He is a big businessman and he knows the world of business. But also he didn't come for money. Okay? His parents were middle class and, YouTube was brand new, and so they made it big on YouTube, him and his brother. Then they were able to transition that to Disney. And they also, learned. And they learned well about how to do business. So what they've done is carefully craft things. And it's obvious if you not only watch Jake as an athlete, but just listen to him. He is a very ingenious fellow. He's a very well thought out guy. And I think most people have agreed with that fact. But the truth is that there is a system that Jake was not following. And for Jake, it was helping the boxing community. And I do believe it helped the boxing community. I'm not deep into the boxing community. So, when it comes to this stuff, I can see what's going on outside. It doesn't matter if the same audience is following you. It matters if you get people outside the audience to come in. Boxing didn't have a lot going for it at that time. You had Tyson Fury and not really a whole lot of entertainment outside of that. So it was all just kind of enclosed, and American boxers were not, very prominent, so Americans were not very interested. Basically, he came in and he starts taking on UFC guys. What's important about that? Number one, you cannot argue that UFC guys are less tough than boxers. You could say that boxers are better than boxing than UFC fighters. That's true. But these were very tough guys that know how to hurt people. Okay? So Jake comes in and he starts challenging. He moves from the YouTube celebrity stuff and moves into taking on the UFC guys. These were guys who could hurt people. These were guys who were tough and could knock you out. Even if it wasn't the world's greatest boxing technique, they'd still knock you out. And he started taking out some legends, Anderson Silva. And was it Nick Diaz? This is very important because not only are these good level competitors, especially for him, that's another thing, okay? It's commendable over the fact, yes, they handpick the opponents, any good boxer does, but he needed that because he did not have the Olympic experience. So he did need time to kind of work out his stuff, and so yes, they picked guys who are lower rank. Once again, we're not trying to pretend that Jake Paul is Muhammad Ali, okay? We're not trying to pretend that. We're just simply saying that he's praiseworthy. He's not, he's not a fraud. He's somebody who should be respected for what he's trying to accomplish. But when he does this, UFC is the business competitor against boxing. UFC was siphoning off boxing events. Okay, the business itself was starting to cave in. So when Jake Paul starts beating UFC competitors with boxing, what is he doing? He's showing, hey, boxing has merit. And so he brings in a huge audience, and he's making the money. And then what does he do? Not only does he have his own promotions, but he's got respected fighters, and also he's got he does a lot of work helping out female boxing in the female boxing community. I think this is before he took on Mike Tyson. He went and journeyed with the U.S. Olympic team and did what he could to help them out, gave inspirational speeches, probably donated some money. I can't see why he'd be on there without donating money. And basically did what he could to, chant for the USA and all that kind of stuff. In fact, he said he wants to try for the Olympics in 2028. So basically, he's doing positive things, okay? And yet, he's evil and blah, 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 okay? So he does these things. Everybody would make fun of him because he lost to Nick Fury. Nick Fury was a ranked fighter in his weight class, okay? And he defeated Jake Paul after 8 rounds, and he lost in a decision. He did not get knocked out. He also, what was it? He didn't get knocked out. It was a split decision, okay? It wasn't like he didn't fight back. He fought very well, and he, just barely lost by, well, I don't know if it was barely lost, but he did, there was legitimate contention, okay? Even one of the commentators in the fight was saying maybe Jake Paul won. Why? Because he knocked Nick Fury to his butt, okay? So, once again, oh yeah, he's illegitimate because of that. Meanwhile, he's been training at a hardcore professional level ever since. When he takes on Anthony Joshua, yeah, I don't like the optics. Didn't really get me when he's like doing the double leg and stuff like that. So not a fan of that, not proud of that. But at the same time, the reasoning was that Anthony Joshua, of course, he's a lot bigger than anybody Jake's ever taken on. This guy's 6'6". He's putting all the weight on him. When they put the weight on you, then you start losing your breath. And as a wrestler, I know this pretty easily. Then you start losing your breath. You start losing your energy. And then when they break up, they can, start pummeling you again. So that had to be said. AJ was not a perfect angel either. I do blame Jake, but he wasn't a perfect angel. He knees him in the crotch, that kind of stuff. So, that's kind of, where that goes. But basically, he does fight AJ. He does hit them with some hard shots. And yet, once again, these YouTube videos acting like, oh, he never did any of that. Oh, it was a total wipeout. Oh, And, so that's kind of where I'm kind of like, okay, this is a little overwhelming, And once again, they're using like all the same catchphrases, like they're all reading off the same script. And the thing to me is that maybe it's the industry that's the bad guy. Maybe the industry wants to keep all the boxers impoverished and then use them when they feel like, and they don't care if they give these guys brain damage, okay? And, it's almost like Stockholm Syndrome. The boxers are kind of like, that's terrible. You didn't go through all this and you didn't do that. It's like, well, would you like to not have to go through that? Would you like to be able to, still have coherent conversations when your kids and your grandkids when you grow up? You want to live long enough to see your grandkids when you grow up? So that's kind of like what happens there. Also, some of them just talk smack because they would like to get Jake to have a match with him. Also, another thing that Jake Paul was dealing with that people don't think about is that he was going to fight the little guy, Tank. Is it Tank Alvarez? Yeah, he was going to take him on, and that guy was like way smaller, right? So, in order to train for that, you have to train for speed. Now, that's good because obviously he was trained for speed and he had speed. By the way, if he's not a real pro, he wouldn't have that kind of speed. Right? The fact that like Anthony Joshua is lean and mean, okay, he's got no body fat, and he's still missing punches at Jake. That means he's pretty good, okay? Using a lot of good techniques throughout the fight. These are good things, okay? These are things you ought to clap for. Say, hey, you did a good job. But nevertheless, he's the worst evil, and you should never. Oh, how dare he? How dare he? What kind of creep is that? How dare you try to achieve something? How dare you try to better your life? Which in Jake's story bettered his life. He got a little bit too much Hollywood when he was a little bit too young and started falling down the hole. Okay? He started getting involved with the wrong types of people, and was really at the bottom. I think he might have even contemplated suicide, but I don't remember every detail. So for him, boxing helped him get out, and he wanted to kind of renew and make his life better. That should be commendable. Okay. So I don't find him to be fake. There's always details, and like some people now. Apparently, AJ is over in Nigeria. This is very bizarre. Nigeria is a Muslim country that is hateful of its Christian population and has been committing genocide against all Christians. And I don't know AJ's religious views other than he was bragging about how he was going to steal Jake's soul. Sounds kind of voodoo-esque, actually. But he is driving down in Nigeria with two of his homeboys, and even though he's British, he's wanting to hang out in Nigeria. About the same time, Trump puts bombs down there. Okay, so I don't know if there's a coincidence there, but basically, somebody ran the crew off the road, and everybody died but AJ. And now there's gossip that AJ is supposed to say he's going to retire or whatever. And so now people are saying, well, Jake Paul, with his magical powers, caused the accident to happen, and now he's killing them with his money and voodoo and superpowers because, like, he got his jaw broke. Okay, whatever. But basically, I'm not going to say, well, therefore he's the perfect guy. No. But I do think that because he's disrupting the system, that's why all these videos are coming out. And you got to watch for this stuff because, a mind is a terrible thing to be manipulated and wasted. So don't be manipulated. Think critically. I'll catch you later.